Nice to be here today. My name is Merissa, and yeah, we're at DevConf. How cool has that been? Um, so, I am a software engineering team lead at an amazing company called Solid iTech. And if you haven't heard of us, we do business automation for internet service providers. And we've recently expanded into the renewable energy space, where I am a team lead on a team that is trying to make the world a better place, one solar installation at a time. So if you want to check us out at soliditech.com, and we will be running a little bit of a competition, so stay tuned for that. I'll share that a little bit later. So what I want to talk to you about today is my personal journey from a solo developer role to a team lead in tech. And I started my journey at Solid iTech a couple of years ago as a fresh graduate. I had no previous work experience, and I was super excited for having achieved my lifelong goal of becoming a software engineer. And it took me about a month or two to get over that, and I wanted to move on to the next goal, which I naively set as becoming a team lead. And I would have achieved that in the next couple of months, so it would have been great, right? However, I wasn't prepared for all the twists and turns that I did face along this journey, and I think that we need to maybe explore that a little bit more. One of the first things I really struggled with was teamwork. Now, at Varsity, we get exposed to teamwork projects, and we sort of work together to get things done. But in my experience, it was like there were two types of people at Varsity. You would have the people who would do all of the work for the project, and then you would have the people who would let other people do all of the work for the project. Now, I was one of the previous, and when I got to the working environment, what struck me was that here, everyone wants to work on the project, and I couldn't just step in and take over, which was not easy. I also had to learn how to take criticism, and that was also not easy. So yeah, I really struggled to find my place in my team when I started. Luckily, I had an amazing mentor who was my team lead at the time, and I learned so many things from him. But one of the first things that I learned, and I think it has stuck with me ever since, is to not get too attached to your code. When you move from a varsity environment where your code is yours, you write the code to get your marks, it's all singular ownership. But when you're in an environment at a company, the code becomes the product of the team. And there's this shared ownership of the code. And everyone has a responsibility to make it as good as it can possibly be. And sometimes that'll mean that the code that you contributed needs to be changed or even removed. So yeah, making that mindset change from singular ownership to everyone owns the product was something I had to learn. Then this one to me was the most difficult, was patience and continuous learning. I think that in our educational years at school, at Varsity, we get used to advancing through things really quickly. Every year at school, you move into a new grade, and at Varsity, even 6 months, you're moving onto a new topic. And at work, you're not going to get a promotion every 6 months. Well, I mean, some of you guys might, but that's not going to be the norm. And just learning to get stuck in and be patient was something that I had to learn how to do. And then obviously continuous learning. At Varsity, we sort of focus on a topic for 6 months, we move on. I know some people go further in their studies, but at this point, as a fresh graduate, I've never actually taken the time to get a really deep understanding of the things I was doing. So just taking every day as a learning opportunity was something that I also had to get used to. Then it took me a lot of dedication and hard work. It took me actually 5 years to get into a team lead role, and I want to stress that fact. It took me years, not months. And while I was in this process of trying to become a team lead, I got frustrated with that because other people were getting promotions and I wasn't. And I was just like, why? Why? I'm working just as hard as they are. And I spoke to my team lead about this, and he actually told me, you know what? There's no shame in taking the time to develop your skills to a point where when you do get the promotion, you are mature enough and ready for this role. Then came a time where I felt ready. I knew I was more mature and I was ready to become a lead. And the next problem was, how do I get the people who give the promotions to give me one? How do I get noticed? And I asked a couple of people, and the answer that came to me most frequently was volunteer for new challenges, which, by the way, is how you end up presenting at DevConf. What I did was I got involved in training new starters at my company, which was something I'd never done before. I had to learn a lot. I also started presenting training as company-wide training. And I got involved in some internal company projects, which covered topics that I'd never worked with before either. So what that shows the people who are giving the promotions is that you're ready to learn on the job and take on the responsibility of a project. And then finally, I became a team lead. It was great. I had a big celebration because now life was going to be cool. It was just going to be all sunshine and roses. I mean, what else could it be? Until I realized that being a team lead is actually really hard. And while I was writing this talk, I thought about why I had such a naive view of what being a team lead would be. And I think that in today's Instagram picture-perfect world, we don't talk about the difficult stuff. If you go onto something like LinkedIn right now, you're going to see hundreds of posts about people who just started a new role or who just got promoted, and they're talking about all of the success. But you're not going to see any posts about people who are struggling with their project deadlines, leads who are overwhelmed with the workload that they're dealing with, people who are managing someone that they don't really know how to manage because managing people is difficult. And we'll talk about that just now. So I think that inspired me to come and talk to you guys today. I'm going to talk to you about the difficult stuff. And when I was preparing for this talk, I talked to some of my fellow leads, and I realized that we all sort of struggle with the same things when we start this new journey. The first thing I really struggled with was managing people. I mean, up until this point in my career, the only person I'd ever managed was myself. So then I got this promotion and suddenly had to manage people. And turns out people have different personalities, motivators, skills, and we could do an entire DevConf talk just on managing people. So that was hard. The next thing I really struggled with was balancing technical work with leadership responsibilities. I mean, when I started, I thought it would be a 50-50 split. I'd work on development 50% of the time, and then I'd manage people. Easy, right? Sorry. What it actually felt like was this impossible balancing act that could come crumbling down at any minute. So it really was something I struggled with. The next one sort of came as a surprise for me. I'm an extrovert. Communication normally comes easy to me. But when I entered this team lead role, I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of communication I now had to do. I had to talk to my development manager, I had to talk to my Scrum manager, I had to talk to the people on my team, which consists of juniors and seniors. I had to talk to testers, I had to talk to the clients, I had to talk to third-party integration people, and even stakeholders. So just getting used to all of that communication, it was really overwhelming at the start. Delegation was also something that I really struggled with, and it sort of ties in with the balancing act. It often felt to me that I had to have an extra set of hands, and little did I know that the extra set of hands were actually the people on my team. And I really had to learn how to let go of things and let my team help. Managing conflict. Now, I have been lucky thus far. We haven't had much conflict. But my team actually played a prank on me one day. I joined a meeting a couple of minutes late, and two guys were having a full-on fight. They were like calling each other names, and it was terrible. And I immediately jumped into mediator role. I was like, okay, I need to, settle this. And then obviously they started laughing because I was panicking. But in that moment, I realized that I am the person on the team who has to manage conflict now. And that sort of prompted me to research conflict management approaches. Time management is also maybe a little bit weird to pop up here. We've done time management at school, at varsity, in our careers at this point. But I really only struggled with time management for the first time when I became a lead. And I found myself doing quite a bit of overtime, which I later realized was an indicator of poor time management. So yeah, just learning how to manage my time better was a struggle. And then finally, adapting to change. I think when I was a solo developer, I had this sort of naive view of how projects go. You sort of get given requirements, you develop them, you deliver them. So it's sort of a straightforward process. But as a lead, I got into the background of that, and I realized that a project really can be a roller coaster. And just learning how to adapt to change, but not only for yourself, for an entire team, was, again, difficult. So now you're sitting there thinking, okay, cool, being a team lead sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back to being a developer. And I'm here to tell you that there is a set of tools that we underappreciate and underdevelop that can help us to change this journey. And that's soft skills. I think that soft skills are even more important than technical skills at this point in your career. And I think that we need to for those people who are still working towards your leadership roles, work on your soft skills now already. That's going to make your life so much easier later on. And to those of you who are already in lead roles, if you work on these things, I think that your life can really be much easier, much simpler. The first one, and I think obviously the most important one, is communication. Being a lead is all about talking to everyone on your team. And communicating effectively is different than just communicating. So for all of these things that I'm going to talk about, and we could have entire talks, I've tried to summarize it into the things that have helped me. So these are just my tips and tricks. One of the things that I had to learn how to do is to use different strategies to address different audiences. Now, as a lead, you're going to be talking about the same project to a junior developer, maybe a senior developer. You're going to talk to non-technical stakeholders. And you're just going to have to learn how to change your language and your communication to match the audience. Then I've learned to use follow-up questions, and that just helps you to gauge the audience's understanding of what you are communicating. Things like, do you agree with that? Does this make sense? It just prompts them to relay their understanding to you, and then you can adjust what you need to adjust. I'm a firm believer in a picture is worth 1,000 words. Something that I learned actually quite early on in my career is to use visual aids in communication. If you take the example of trying to explain to a customer where to download an order, and you want to do this with an email, and you start typing, go to this page and click this button, chances are they'll still be confused. But if you provide them with a nice big picture, with a nice big red border and an arrow, and say, click that one, they'll understand you probably. So just use pictures where you can. Use non-verbal cues to adapt. So looking at the people's faces and their body languages can sort of prompt you to maybe ask a follow-up question. Maybe someone looks confused and not 100% with you, or maybe they look frustrated, so they don't actually agree with you. So picking up on these cues can actually help you to communicate better. Something that I think is very important as a lead is emotional intelligence. I've summarized it into 3 pillars of emotional intelligence, the first being self-awareness. A little while ago, we dealt with a really difficult client, and it was late one night, and he went on a rant, and he was telling us off. And I was really angry with him. I immediately wanted to rant back at him. But I took a moment and checked in with myself, and I thought, why am I feeling angry? And I realized that I've been putting a lot of effort into this project, and him complaining at us really hurt my feelings. So, I just checked in with myself to gain that understanding. The next pillar is empathy, which is sort of the opposite of self-awareness, and that is understanding the feelings of those around you. In my example, I took a moment to think about what the client was feeling. And the client had actually had their boss down their neck, and the app wasn't working, and they couldn't do their job. So in that, understanding that they needed us to help them, I realized that, yes, they might have said some things that they shouldn't have said, but it helped me frame my mind towards a solution and away from, just negative emotions. And then finally, one that might be a little bit difficult for the crowd here, social skills. I know that as IT people, we tend to prefer our computers to other people, but as a lead, you're going to be put in so many situations where you need to communicate and work with everyone else. So practice water cooler talk, go to your company events, and just dust off those social skills. Charles Darwin once said, "It is not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change." And I think that learning how to be adaptable is something that will take you a long way as a lead. Make a plan, sure, but make sure that you're not stuck on that plan. If things change, be adaptable. Look at how you can change your plan to work with the solution. Problem solving is one that I think we are working hard on at this point in our careers. We solve problems in tech all the time. And we know that we start with assessing the situation. But I think as a lead, problem solving goes a level deeper. You need to really take the time to gather all of the relevant information related to your problem. Where does the solution that you're designing fit into the goals of the business? How are you going to build the solution to work not only for the requirements, but also for the overall picture? Then there's obviously multiple ways to solve problems, and again, you're going to have to align your solution with the overall business goal. If, for example, your company is really focused on security, you might take a more secure approach. Maybe you're really focused on performance, so you'll take that approach. And then finally, something you haven't had to do up until this point is involve your team in problem solving. You now have a team of experts at your disposal, and involving them in the design process is going to lead to better solutions. All of the people on your team might have different experience levels, and they'll bring something to the table that you probably didn't even think about. Then, conflict resolution. I have a picture here of a doctor listening to a patient, and that's how I want you to think about active listening. In a conflict situation, you want to listen to both well, maybe there's more than two parties, but you want to listen to all parties in the conflict as if you were listening for symptoms. You want to try to understand the root causes for the conflict rather than just listen to the content of what they're saying. Then, encourage your team to focus on solutions rather than problems. When you have someone saying something like, maybe, I'm really frustrated with this person because they do that and this, you might say to them, okay, well, how can we make it better? Framing their mind in a solution direction is going to make them more easier to work with, really. And then finally, encourage empathy and flexibility in your team. Oftentimes in conflict situations, to resolve the conflict, someone's going to have to step back, maybe take on a new view of the situation. So encourage people to have empathy and be flexible. John C. Maxwell said, time management is an oxymoron. Time is beyond our control. And the clock keeps ticking regardless of how we lead our lives. Priority management is the answer to maximizing the time that we have. And this quote really resonated with me. We will never have enough hours in the day to get all of our work done. It often feels like we're going to work all of the overtime and it still doesn't get done. So learning how to prioritize what you have to do is very important. I know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to time management for everyone, but I do think that as a lead, you should take the time to learn about strategies and pick one that works for you. In my case, I like to time block my calendar and I like to use to-do lists. So find something that really works for you. Effective delegation. Now, I have a funny story about this one. When I just started being a lead, I had gone into the office and I started working that day on my project, my programming for the day. And one of the junior team members on my team came and talked to me. We had a cool chat, very chilled. And the chat sort of went its course, and it ended, and I started working again. I looked up, and this guy was still standing there. And I sort of looked at him with like a, what do you want kind of look. And then he asked me, so what should I be doing today? And that question hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what he was supposed to be doing today, and he was looking to me to tell him. So I think I told him something like, go do some training or whatever, and I immediately started investigating, how do I delegate to people? Like, how do you do this effectively? And in my search on how to effectively delegate, I came across a little anecdote of a crazy cruise ship captain. And I'll say that one 3 times fast. This captain would go out and greet the guests personally. He would then take their luggage to their rooms for them and give them a tour of the ship. Later, he would take them to the dining hall where he would wait on them, and then he would actually cook their meals and also entertain them for the evening. So when you start out with this story, you think, wow, this guy can do everything. He's really great. But it turns out the ship never left the harbor because no one was steering the ship. So the actual cruise fails completely and disastrously. And the lesson here is deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. You're going to need to let go of some stuff. In order to let go of some stuff, you're going to need to mentor the members on your team to a point where you feel confident enough in their abilities so that you can actually delegate to them. And I think that being a mentor is one of the most important roles that you have as a team lead. So, like my team lead had a massive influence on my career, you will now have a massive influence on the careers of others. So, learning how to effectively mentor people is really important. One of the things that I really believe in is learning from other people's mistakes. I think that once you've learned good advice, the only good thing you can really do with it is pass it on. So I think learning how to be vulnerable and to share experiences with your mentees is important. We've talked about active listening before, but I think that it's so important that it requires its own slide. When you're actively listening to a mentee, you want to give them your full attention. Now, I'm not talking about I'm listening to you while I'm reading a Skype message on my phone or typing away at an email. I'm talking about full one-on-one attention. And now I know we're very busy and we can't always do that, but I think that your mentee deserves that you actually schedule this time with them if you don't have the time to do it right now. They deserve your full attention. Don't interrupt them while they're speaking. Now, this one might be actually more difficult than you think. Allowing people to completely finish what they're saying is not always that simple because we tend to already start analyzing what they're asking while they're communicating. And one of my mentors actually said something recently that resonated with me, and he said, a lead should listen more than they speak. And I think that even maybe working in an intentional tiny bit of awkward silence after someone speaks is good because it prompts them to say what they actually wanted to say. Ask open-ended questions. This one might feel silly when you're doing it. That whole, and how does that make you feel situation. But asking these kinds of questions, again, shows your mentees that you really care about them. Reflect and paraphrase. This one also shows your mentee that you're paying attention. So he might say something like, so what I'm getting from this is that you feel X, Y, and Z, and you need this, that, and the other. And doing this shows them that you're actually listening and that you care about what they need. Finally, show empathy and validate feelings. I mean, if you think about it, we all started there, we all felt anxious, and we all went to mentors for help. So when they are coming to you for this kind of advice, remember that you were there too, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable in front of them. Providing constructive feedback and encouragement is something that's also not always straightforward. Something that I've learned that is important to do is when you're providing praise, only provide praise. Because if you tell someone 10 good things and one bad thing, they're going to go home thinking about the bad thing. So when you want to praise them for work that they've done, even though they might have done some other things that aren't as great, when you want to praise them and walk away. You can deal with feedback at another stage. Then I'm calling it the feedback sandwich. I'll let you decide what other people call it. Now, the idea here is to provide negative feedback or criticism in a little bit of a bow. You start out by saying something good, like I see all of the effort that you've put into this, and I know that you're working hard. Then deal the blow, say, but we need to work on X, Y, and Z. And then soften the blow by saying, but I know that you can do this and we can work on it together. And that will soften the blow of criticism. And finally, I know we get paid for our jobs, but I think something as simple as a thank you can go a long way in motivating a team member. People put in a lot of work and a lot of effort into what they do, and we often forget to just say thank you. It really doesn't take much to do it, but it can make a massive difference. Then you want to foster independence and self-reliance in your team members. When they do come to you for guidance, maybe don't give them direct answers all the time. So what I like to do is I try to keep the conversation open. So I'll be saying something like, have you tried solving the problem this way? Have you tried this technology? And that sort of gets them to think about the problem before just implementing the solution you give them. Then, dealing with disappointment. I think as a lead, we tend to take the brunt of disappointment harsher than the rest of the people in our teams. And dealing with disappointment is not something that is always easy for everyone. I mean, just last week, I made a mistake in a production environment, and I felt really down about it. And I actually spoke to my development manager about it. And he told me that this is just an event, this is going to pass too. And I found a cool quote about it by Zig Ziglar. So I think, remember that you are not a failure. You might have failed at something, but you are not the failure. As a lead, you're going to need to learn to identify reasons for project failure. And looking out for these things can assist you in preventing project failure, really. One of the first things is poor planning and project management. So keep an eye out for that. Lack of stakeholder engagement is a difficult one to deal with because stakeholders sometimes tend to chuck a problem at IT and say, solve it for us. But that's not how it really works in the real world. To solve a problem adequately, you're going to need constant feedback from your stakeholders. Does this work for you? Do we need to add this? Do we need to take that out? So engage with your stakeholders. Technical challenges, obviously, can bring any project to its knees, so properly identifying the technical requirements is important as well. We've all dealt with scope creep, but this can really also cause a project to fail miserably, where requirements change and the initial goal turns into a whole different thing eventually. So watch for that. And one that I'm very passionate about as well is inadequate testing. I think testing is such an important part of a project. So take the time to go through your testing processes and check if you've got adequate QA processes. Do you have proper test coverage of your system? This is something that can really bring a project to its knees. Some coping mechanisms and strategies for dealing with failure. When I made my production mistake, my development manager told me, we're human, we make mistakes, but it would only be really bad if we didn't learn from it and improve our processes. So what we did was we actually changed the process of how queries get run in our environment, in our production environment, and the idea behind it was to reduce the risk of this mistake happening again to someone else, maybe. So accept that you're going to make mistakes, but make sure that you focus on learning from your mistakes. As a lead, you're going to be giving feedback and support and helping everyone else around you. But remember that you still need support and feedback. So keep your mentors around, you're not done with them quite yet, and make sure that you go to them when you need help. And finally, I think the most important thing of this entire talk is that in order to take care of everything else and everyone else, you need to take care of yourself. Practice self-care. Check in with your physical health, your mental health. I mean, are you getting enough sleep? Did you eat today? That kind of thing. And it can be really easy to lose track of those things when you're busy with everything all the time. And then, the fun parts of the talk, we are running a leadership quiz. We've tried to design this in a way that you could benefit from it, even if you don't win the money, but the money is cool too. So it's a quiz that asks you a set of questions about your leadership style and how you deal with various scenarios. I want to implore you to actually be honest with yourself, because we're not going to analyze the data, I promise. We'll then put you into a category of leader, and I don't think that there's particularly a bad leadership style out there. I think there are different leadership styles, and I think that each leadership style has pros and cons to it. So identifying your style, looking at the pros and cons, and learning how to improve how you lead can really take you a long way. I'm going to leave this up here. I also do have some business cards with the QR codes on that I'll distribute later in networking. You can also come up and grab one from me. And that's my talk. We have a couple of minutes. If there are any questions, I can take a few now. Yes, Avi?
What's up next for your development?
What's up next? I have not decided yet. I think when I started, and I told you guys, I decided that I wanted to be a team lead like 2 or 3 months into it. I've learned that you need to take some time to just adjust and to get used to the role that you're doing before you move on to the next thing. So I think what's up next is just getting stuck into this leadership role and, making a change where I can. And then, I don't know, we'll see where the world takes me. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes?
Did you study something for managing teams, or did you go by experience?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think it sort of leads into what I was saying about soft skills being underappreciated. I studied a computer science degree. I had no management experience when I moved into a leadership role. I had been working at the company for about 5 years. So yeah, it went on seniority. But yeah, I do think that that's something we need to focus on as a society, is giving people the opportunity to really learn these skills. Maybe they need to start doing courses before we give them, these promotions, because I think you get really overwhelmed because you just have not learned how to do many of these things. So yeah, not in my case, but I hope to see it being implemented, in the future. Cool. Yes.
A person in their career may get to the point where, in their environment, they are told the next step is to become a team lead. I would like to see, as an industry, the opportunity for a tech lead role, where you do not have to manage people, you don't have to deal with the challenges that come with being a team lead, and you can focus on the tech. What I'd like to see is more talks around how to choose the correct path forward for people like that between tech lead and team lead.
I really agree with you, and I think that's also ties in with people not being informed about the challenges of being a lead. We naturally move into the lead role because that's what industry tells us. You're going to be a team lead after you're a software developer. It's just how it works. And I think that if we communicate these challenges and also talk about, like you said, the other options that are available, you'll get less people feeling that they want to go back from leadership into what they were doing before. You'll get people who are more prepared for their roles and moving into roles that they actually like and actually want to do. So definitely, that is change that we need to bring into the industry as a whole, is to change the perception that being a lead is the next step, really, because there are so many other options available. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I have time's up. I can quickly try. Yeah.
How do you balance empathy and tough empathy?
Look, I think that empathy to me really is not about judging someone or making any kind of decision about them. It's really just to understand. So I'm not entirely sure about the whole tough empathy concept. To me, empathy is really just taking the time to not make a judgment yet. I don't care if this is a good thing or a bad thing yet. I just want to understand the concepts behind what this person is thinking, what they're feeling, and then you use that to make an informed decision. Cool. Thank you, everyone. That's all the time I have. Thank you for attending.